Welcome to KRWG Public Media 2024 election coverage featuring the New Mexico House District 53 Candidate Forum. Hello, I'm Anthony Moreno. KRWG Public Media and the League of Women Voters are pleased to present this forum. The rules for this forum are the candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question, and the candidate should not mention her opponent in her answers. Also, some residents in our region have submitted questions to KRWG Public Media at our website and at station engagement events. We'll be asking those as well. My co-moderator for this forum is Kathy Brook with the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico. We now welcome District 53 Democratic candidate Sarah Silva. KRWG Public Media invited Republican candidate Elizabeth Winterroud to attend this forum. Candidate Winterroud informed us she was unable to attend. Let's begin with the first question. Candidate Silva, why do you want to run for this seat?
Thanks for having me, Kathy and Anthony. It's really great to be here. One of the reasons that I'm running is I have 20 years experience community organizing here and in other parts of the country. And I've been a policy advocate for the same amount of time, working on issues of housing, healthcare, immigration reform. And then something happened in July where Dr. John Hill, who knocked on my door during the primary, got really sick. And I got a phone call asking if I would take his place on the ballot. And after a lot of discernment, I thought, this is the way that I can serve. Just like we go to jury duty or any other public service, this is my chance to step up and help make the future a little bit better for my kids and families across New Mexico.
Thank you.
If elected, what are your highest priorities?
If I'm elected, one of my highest priorities is to help New Mexicans get food on the table and be home in time to eat it. We all have a ton of worries, but one of the main worries is, can I get a job that pays well? Can I take care of my aging parents? Can I take care of my kids? And can we be safe doing all those things and be part of a really tight-knit community? And so there are issues that the state works on day in and day out that affect every facet and corner of our lives as New Mexicans. And so one of my priorities is infrastructure. I can talk about that more in a little bit, but really focusing on that. And the issues that impact rural southern New Mexico, because I was born and raised here, so I really want to focus on that area too.
Thank you.
What's your plan to address affordable housing in New Mexico?
So I cut my teeth on affordable housing as a 20-something-year-old, and affordable housing is one of those things that if you lose your housing, everything else is harder to get. It's harder to enroll back in school. It's harder to stay on your meds. It's harder to visit your doctor. And it's harder to rent again or to purchase a home. And so I want to make sure that people who are in affordable housing can stay in their housing. And if you're paying more than 30% of your income on housing, that is unaffordable. And if you layer transportation on top of that, it becomes even less affordable. And so I want to make sure that we are building and developing enough housing that's affordable. And there is a trend across the West in particular where there are hedge funds and private equity firms that are gobbling up single family homes and holding on to them and renting or selling them at much higher prices, locking out locals and people who just want their first home. And so I want to work on legislation that bans private equity firms in New Mexico from purchasing our housing stock and making it more available for first-time home buyers.
Thank you.
What can state lawmakers do to address violent crime and property crime in the state?
This is a big issue. And there's a couple of things that I think that legislators and people locally can do. There was a special session earlier this year to talk about crime and safety, and there wasn't a consensus about what to do. And so my viewpoint is, and my viewpoint as an organizer, has been that we know the things that keep us safe. I live in a really safe neighborhood because people can afford groceries. They can afford to pay their rent or their mortgage. and they can afford health care or that one emergency. There are many, many communities that don't have that luxury, and it creates a lack of safety just inside our families. I grew up in a low-income family, and I know how unsafe that can feel. And so I want to concentrate on those programs and policies. And I know that there are places like Chaparral that are missing out on other elements of safety, like law enforcement. The sheriff in Doña Ana County closed the substation in Chaparral and pulled all the school resource officers out of Chaparral. I was in a meeting last week with 150 parents to talk about public safety, and I was really excited to listen to their ideas and their hopes for safety for their kids, but also for the entire community.
What do you feel the state legislature can do to improve mental health services?
Well, we've got a lot of work to do since Governor Susana Martinez just decimated our mental health care system in the state of New Mexico. We were making gains, and now it feels like we have to start over in a lot of places, especially southern New Mexico. And so I really want us to focus on the things that are happening and building off of those, like the triage center here in Las Cruces. I'm glad to see that it's on the path to getting reopened. And so I would want to see that not only reopened, but expanded. I want to make sure, and I'd work with local school districts to make sure that there are mental health counselors in our schools, and that our communities and our Latino communities know that there isn't a stigma to ask for help. Mental health is just as important as going to the eye doctor or getting stitches if you get hurt. And so there's no shame in seeking help when you feel like you need mental health support. And so I would look to creating programs and community gatherings where we can talk about the importance of mental health throughout the district and in southern New Mexico.
Thank you.
This is a community question. What reforms would you support to improve New Mexico's educational ranking?
Yes, also a huge issue. So I was educated here in Doña Ana County. I went to Gadsden High School. I went to the Gadsden Independent School District my whole life, as did many of my family. And so this is the community that raised me and got me ready for a 4-year private institution where I was able and had the privilege to go to college. And my 16-year-old goes to high school here. And so I know that there are lots of great things happening, and one of the things that I would look to is continuing to support really rigorous and robust education. And in order for our kids to access that rigorous and robust education, they also need clean air in their schools. We know that when people breathe cleaner air, test scores go up, and they get less sick, and they miss less days of school. And then I also want to look at vocational training in high school. My dad was an auto vica, and he got a welding certificate, and man, he took off from there. Like, that's all he needed. And I think if we are able to invest more in the trades and really focus in on that and work with DACC, I think there's some really great opportunities to build that out.
Thank you.
If elected, how do you plan on addressing substance abuse in New Mexico?
Well, one, I'm really glad that New Mexico, as well as like all the states across the country, were able to benefit from the opioid settlement in 2021. That means we have about $680 million to use in the state for treatment and other therapies that can help people on the road to recovery. And so I want to make sure that that money gets used equitably across our state, that our rural communities get access to those services. And like, there are other really important things that individuals across the community can do, like carrying Narcan so people don't overdose and die, that we have ways to save lives one-on-one in our own communities, and we need to use those more, learn how to use those more. And then also making sure that people have access to again, mental health and therapy and the things that help them address the issues that they're dealing with rather than coping with them with substance abuse.
Thank you.
Another community question. If elected, what steps would you take to address healthcare challenges in New Mexico?
I grew up most of my life uninsured. The State Children's Health Plan in the United States passed in 1997, and I was a junior in high school. A sophomore in high school. And so up until then, I spent a lot of my life uninsured. And then when I went to college, the Affordable Care Act didn't exist. And so I spent many years uninsured and then got into medical debt in my early 20s. I know what it's like to be in debt and desperately need to see a doctor. And I don't want anyone to have that feeling or experience. And so I really appreciate the expansions and waivers that the state of New Mexico has done with Medicaid. The more that we can support Medicaid and people being on Medicaid if they need it is crucial to that safety net that I talked about. And so I'm really glad that, for example, people on Medicaid now have access to doula care. And so if you're on Medicaid and you are pregnant, you can get a doula. And we know when doulas exist in communities, maternal mortality plummets. And so I'm really excited to see that workforce being built out, and the other early childhood education that is happening and working with individual families and neighborhoods to build up the health of the family. And then the last thing I'll say is I also want people, I want to get private hedge funds out of our medical care system.
Okay, we're moving on to our next question. How can New Mexico continue to bridge the digital divide?
One is internet and broad-based internet and access to the internet has to be a public utility. People can't apply for jobs, they can't register to vote in some cases, and do other things that their life requires them to do without access to internet. And so I would work to make sure that the internet is a public utility, just like our water or our electricity. And so I think that that's one of the first things. And then also just supporting broadband going up in parts of rural New Mexico. I know that there's lots of work to pull down that funding from the federal government, and I'm glad to see it used in really rural places that I've been to. So I would support more of that.
Thank you.
Another community question. What actions do you feel state lawmakers can take to address climate change?
I think there could be a lot of things that we could be doing more of. We are cooking ourselves alive. It was 97 degrees yesterday, and it is late September. And I remember a time here in southern New Mexico when that just wasn't the case as a kid. And I want my family, my kids, to grow up on a livable planet. And so when I look at places like Chaparral that are heating their homes with propane, and there's a need for larger utilities to support, I want to think through how can we move from propane to electrifying Chaparral and moving to solar. There's a lot of opportunity to build solar that neighborhoods and communities can all benefit from. And so I want to support that. And the more that we diversify our budget and get our budget out of oil and gas, the better. So this transition to clean energy is just going to be more and more vital. So I am really going to be advocating for that if I'm elected.
Thank you.
What's your plan to address the growing rates of food insecurity in our state?
I see that wages in many parts of the state are not keeping up with the prices of food, gas, and other things that families need to pay for. That's why when I was executive director in 2014, I was executive director of New Mexico Cafe, and we pushed to raise the minimum wage. but not only raise the minimum wage, we were one of the few organizations in the country to actually win indexing to inflation. And so when wages keep up with inflation, then that's when we know that we can get food on the table and we don't have kids that go hungry. I was one of those kids. And so the more that we can support those programs, supporting SNAP benefits and people's access to it is going to be really key. And I also am really dedicated to ensuring that those programs are really well funded. I'm really glad that there's a food pantry opening up in Chaparral later in the month. And so I'm going to be continuing to support those programs and people.
Thank you.
Another community question. What would you propose to diversify New Mexico's economy and promote sustainable economic growth?
I think we're on a really good track right now. So our ability to think big and dream big about what is possible in New Mexico is really one of our strengths. We look at the spaceport, and that was a big dream and a big risk. When we look at film and TV, that's been a big dream and a big risk. And so I think I would really love for us to continue to dream big about the possibilities that are right here in the state in order to diversify our economy. I think that there are a number of really creative industries that we can bring here, along with TV and film. There's other industries in the arts, and look at other industries that want to come to New Mexico and give them incentives to be here. I also want to make sure, though, that wealthy corporations are paying what they owe so we get that benefit in terms of revenue.
Thank you.
How can the legislature address water issues in an increasingly arid state?
Yeah, New Mexico's getting drier and drier. And, you know, I grew up on the farm, and I remember as a kid, my grandfather thinking about precipitation and how much water we were going to get from EBID, from the irrigation district that summer. And now, you know, as the farm is still there and my parents are there and they're aging, there's less and less water coming from both from the sky and from EBID. And so knowing that small farmers bear the brunt of a lot of this, and that small farmers are also part of our agricultural tradition, I want to make sure that we are taking care of them, and also making sure that we have a water table that is healthy, that is potable and drinkable, and that we have enough of it. And so making sure that we are looking at the legal threats to our water, and rethinking and analyzing how do we want to use our water into the future. We really have to take this conversation seriously instead of kicking it down the road.
Thank you.
In what ways should the state legislature be addressing its child welfare system to create better outcomes for foster children?
You know, I support children staying with families of origin as much as possible. They have better outcomes when they are with a family that they know. And so the more that we can support that through all the benefits that we've talked about, through SNAP and housing vouchers and other ways that we can keep those costs low for families, that means that they can keep one of their kids in their family instead of separating children from their families of origin. And so I want to make sure that we're supporting all of those systems, and that we put the child first. That is really key, making sure that they have what they need, and supporting them in all the ways that they need, whether it's mental health, physical health, so that they can have some continuity of care and continuity of some stable family life.
Thank you.
What state laws, if any, do you believe should be passed regarding firearm safety?
Yeah, I'm a gun owner and I'm a hunter, and I'm actually missing my deer hunt because I chose to run for office instead this year. And what I would say is I protect and believe in the Second Amendment and our rights to bear arms. I also believe in the right to safety and make sure my kids come home safe after school every single day. And so how are we, and if I were elected and go to Santa Fe, there may be a lot of different things we can do. It might mean banning a certain type of firearm or banning a magazine size that can keep our children and the general public safe from people who want to threaten our livelihood and our well-being and our lives. What I would like for us to think about are how can we make sure that people don't have weapons that can kill many, many people in seconds. That's the thing that I want to look at. And I want to make sure that any laws we pass can hold up to Supreme Court challenges. Given the Supreme Court we have, I don't want to waste time passing laws that we know are going to get rejected. And so I think that there is some things that we can do, though, and I'm really excited to look at that and make sure that our kids come home safe every day.
Thank you.
How do you feel New Mexico can strengthen outdoor recreation?
I feel like I grew up outside, right? Like as kids, getting pushed and go play outside and don't come back till it's dark. And I, as executive director of CAFE, was part of the coalition that helped designate the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks. And if you remember a decade ago, how controversial it was and how many people were against it. And then if you look back now, though, in hindsight, the gem that it has become, that people from across the country come and say, what is a national monument doing in the middle of a desert? And what does that have to offer? And then see the splendor that the Chihuahuan Desert has to offer people, and the vast amount of species and habitat that we have. And so I think there is a lot of work that we can do to continue to expand the outdoor recreation funds that have been created, and getting people out there and getting people out and exploring our lands. There's lots of great groups locally that are doing that. And I want to make sure that it's also reaching across class and income and geography.
Are there any steps New Mexico can take to be better prepared for the energy needs of the 21st century?
I think we can be better prepared when we're using the abundance of solar and wind that we have here. And so there are some great strides that we've been making around that, and we can do more. We will not have the Permian Basin forever. And the more that we focus on that, the more we're just trading away our future. And so I really appreciate the solar arrays that have been going up and the cooperation that has been happening between El Paso Electric and the Bureau of Land Management to get solar arrays up in places across rural New Mexico. And I think we also have to change our habits, our individual habits in electrifying our homes, giving people the ability to swap that old appliance in for a newer, more sustainable one. And we also have to hold big corporations accountable, because even if I replace my stove with an electrical one, it doesn't mean that the wealthy corporation that's polluting our air is that's not going to help. And so I want to make sure we're holding big corporations, wealthy corporations accountable.
All right, we're moving on to our final question.
Should New Mexico move to a paid legislature? Please explain your answer.
So one of the reasons that I said that I'm running and I agreed to run for office is because I see it as a public service. It is part of my duty as a New Mexican, as someone who really believes in democracy, and I really believe in the original intent of we're a volunteer legislature. Anyone can run. It just makes it more accessible. And is that still true today? I had to work really hard to get ready financially to even say yes to this sort of endeavor. And so when the state isn't paying the legislature, somebody is. And so one, I think that the legislature does need to be compensated. I would also consider term limits as part of that. And also looking at how are we creating a legislature that is more transparent, more ethical. All of those things together and combined could really modernize our legislature to help us get more done.
That concludes our New Mexico House District 53 Candidate Forum. We want to thank Democratic candidate Sarah Silva and our co-moderator, Kathy Brook, with the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico. A reminder, you can stay updated with local election coverage by visiting the KRWG News Election Center at our website, krwg.org. I'm Anthony Moreno. Thank you for joining us. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th.